Welcome to the Steve Setka Show, your uncensored champion. I'm your host, Steve Setka, and I'm diving deep into the things that matter most to me: sport, freight, and faith. On the show, we're not afraid to go beyond the surface. We get real, share bold opinions, and hit you where it may be uncomfortable. These are the topics I'm passionate about, and I bet they'll spark something in you too. So buckle up for quick, high-impact episodes that'll shake you up. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Steve Setka Show. We're on episode 41. The year 2025 was the year of the Steve Setka Show. Learning, growing, building, talking about freight, faith, and sport, and all things in between. We have a very special guest on the show today. But before we introduce the guest, I am going to read a verse that's going to frame the show that has been on my heart the last couple of days. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. And I think you're going to like this verse, Brian. Before I let you know what the verse is, and I'm introduce you, I'm going to read it out to the audience here. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. This man I met on a matching platform on LinkedIn. His pronouns are Christ follower. I feel like this verse is perfect. Brian Livingston, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I do like the verse. It kind of covers the basic, doesn't it? Rejoice, pray, for this is the will of God. There's so many things that can happen to us every day. Yeah, so much can happen to us, and that just kind of covers the base.
Incredible, man. Incredible. What comes to mind? Go into a little depth here. Give a minute or two introduction of who you are and frame it around that verse.
Yeah, well, professionally, I'm a chemical engineer, or, trained as a chemical engineer, spent almost 20 years at Caterpillar and diesel engines. So I kind of tease, but it's true. I'm not the sharpest pencil in the cup, but I do know my way around diesel engines and chemistry. And as far as my faith journey goes, I was raised in a Christian home, became a Christian myself, not just riding my parents' coattails, but made that decision myself at 12 years old, between 7th and 8th grade. So I've been walking with Christ since then, and perhaps I should be saying he's been carrying me since then, because that's really the way our relationship works.
That's incredible. I saw that on your profile when we connected on LinkedIn. It said your name, and then it said Christ follower. I said, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Incredible. It's someone wants to know what your identity is. That's who you hold your identity in. I committed myself to the Lord probably 5 or 6 years ago, baptized a couple of years ago, made that choice to follow. I always ask myself the question. I was like, man, like not everybody or not anybody is going to be there from my birth until my death the entire time. They say the day you're born and the day you die are just 2 days, and then you have that dash mark in between, which is your life and what impact did you have.
Yeah.
What am I being led by? How am I being led? And I'm like, man, you can't always rely on people, but you need something to rely on, something to lean into, something to push on and to push you and challenge you, because it's a tough world out there. And that was the decision for me. So I intertwine it into everything I do. Faith in the Lord, principles of the Bible, verses. I spit them out to my friends every single day, but I don't want to be a Christian who shoves it down people's throats. I want to give them the good news, and I want to lead by example. And I do fail, and I do falter, and I do sin, more often than I'd like to, but that's, part of, the faith in general, which is kind of cool. So I talk about faith, I talk about sport, there's talk about freight, talk about sport on the show, and intertwine verses from the Bible and utilize that as the power in order to drive a conversation. So that's where we're at now, man. We are talking about, giving thanks for everything we have in all circumstances, which includes the industry that you and I are both in, freight and transportation. So you've gone from an interesting career with what you just told us a little bit about to being more of a visionary and an inventor now, because you're trying to decarbonize the trucking industry. Am I right?
Well, yeah. I mean, after 20 years with Caterpillar, talking about faith and stuff, right at the beginning of COVID, they chopped about 4,000 of us, and I was one of those. And so I fished around during COVID for something else to do, and really never considered myself any kind of an entrepreneur or business owner or anything, but here I am. Sometimes life hands you those things, and you just got to do it. And it's been super good for me. Yeah, because of my background in chemistry, and all those years working with Caterpillar diesel engines, I stumbled across a really interesting technology. I didn't invent it, but I found a company that is making this technology that allows you to burn large equipment. Well, let's talk trucks. That's most of our audience today. Say 3 to 5% in fuel. And of course, if you're burning 3 to 5% less fuel, that means 3 to 5% less greenhouse gas or carbon dioxide. So you can decarbonize and have it pay for itself. That's kind of the thing that really drew me into this. I was really skeptical at first because, why doesn't the world know about this if it's really so great? And I have some answers for that. It hasn't been marketed the most wonderful way in these last number of years, but we're certainly getting our act together now on that. And boy, I grilled the president, I grilled the chairman of the board, I talked to ex-customers, even ex-employees, and I got a really good story on, the product itself and the technology, how it works, et cetera. So anyway, long story short, I was a super skeptic when I first, ran into this technology. And after, I convinced myself, I was able to throw my name and reputation behind it.
That's fantastic. So there's got to be always in business an economic case, right? And there's also got to be a feasibility case, right? So there has to be a reason why people are going to use something like this. Now, I want you to
Yeah.
show us this product because I know you said you were very open to, considering showing the audience and getting it out there and promoting this
Yeah,
brand,
sure.
promoting this business. So we'll get to that in a minute. But you have this desire in order to provide value for trucking companies, those who own trucks, those who operate trucks, not necessarily just because it's environmentally friendly or it's better for the planet, but also there's a good business case. Can you break down the business case for putting this device you're going to show us into a truck and utilizing with a truck, and how it's also going to give us other benefits like efficiencies and time savings
Yeah.
for the planet?
Yeah, sure. Essentially, okay, let me back up a little bit. I'll go ahead and get the prop out here, but this is what the unit is. It's basically a copper tube with a whole bunch of expensive rare earth catalyst metals and stuff in it. And as you put the diesel fuel in one side, it makes contact with all those catalysts and it breaks apart some of the long chain molecules of diesel into shorter chains. And then that's kind of what you get out the other end here. I mean, you don't get it doesn't convert all of them, of course, but enough to make a difference. And so I think we all can remember from our high school chemistry, maybe dig that out here, that shorter chains are going to burn more efficiently than longer chains. It's like a natural gas to a candle or something. And so that's kind of where the efficiency from this comes in. But if you think about what the knock-on effects of that are, you burn more efficiency, so you make less soot. That makes your DPF last longer. Soot and unburned hydrocarbons are what follow your oil. So your oil is going to last longer. And soot is what chews up your engine and the rings and the pistons, the cylinder liners, the valve train, et cetera. And so your engine's going to last longer also. So when you put all those things together, you get about, and not even counting those things, but just counting the fuel savings alone, you get about a 1 year payback in most trucking operations. So yeah, you decarbonize by 3 to 5%, which means less, 3 to 5% less fuel and less CO2, and you get a payback in about a year. My experience is that there's not a lot of CFOs sitting around, with or having a lot of 1 year payback projects sitting on their desk for approval. It's a pretty good investment
That does
when
sound
you're
like a good investment. That's very interesting.
100% ROI year after year after year.
Yeah,
Pays
especially
for it
after
the
that
first
one
year.
year, right? In terms of a payback. So you
Yeah.
pay for this, you utilize this in the vehicle. I'm not a mechanic myself per se, don't understand this as well as you would or other people in the industry that work on trucks, heavy duty or diesel mechanics per se. But if I'm working backwards with the numbers, some of these trucks are going out on the road for a million miles or 2 million miles are being rebuilt, they're
Mhm.
in the system for a long period of time, and they have to take the engine apart, they have to change the oil. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into these trucks. So if there's a payback in 1 year, like you said, someone with a business mind or a CFO per se, managing the money is going to consider this to be more or less a no-brainer. I would assume that you would have some pushback from some people in regards to some of the controversies with this. Maybe it's too high cost. Maybe the claims aren't as legitimate. Maybe it's not backed by enough data. What sort of things are people telling you that are challenging the assumptions or the claims that you're making, that objections you have to handle in order to sell this product to the market?
Yeah. There's a lot of skepticism. People ask me, like, what's my biggest competition? And generally, I say, kind of with tongue in cheek, is just lack of awareness. Nobody knows that this kind of thing exists. But the second thing, though, is liquid additives. There's a lot of those on the market. They're kind of easy to make. Most of them are solvent based, and you can kind of make them up in your garage. I'm kind of I don't want to, I'm not into dissing my competition, but there's a lot of liquid additives out there and they come and go really quick. So that's our biggest, confusion. They'll ask me, well, how much do you put in a tank? I'm like, you don't. You just put this into this actual piece of hardware. You put in your fuel line and the diesel fuel flows through it. And so you buy the thing once and forget it. And we've had some of these things out there 20 years. They just keep working. Talk about a 1,000,000-mile truck. Yeah, you just keep this thing on and it just keeps working.
Well, it's interesting to think about this because I haven't had a guest on the show talk about this, something like this before, or anything to do with the mechanics of the truck, right? We talk about
Okay.
freight, talk about moving it, talk about fuel rates, talking about different types of trucks, insurance, all the different things that go into the industry specifically, generally. And then there's things in the background that play a major role with the trucking company that requires attention. But when you're moving freight and your business is moving freight or moving loads or doing whatever you're doing with what type of vehicle that you're utilizing, moving passengers, moving equipment, whatever it might be, you're not necessarily thinking of these things in the background. Now, in Canada, where I am, in the United States, we have issues in trucking, the trucking industry these days, specifically when it comes to carriers who have to compete in a market that is very difficult and very challenging in the last couple of years. The last year or two, it hasn't been a great freight market for carriers.
Sure.
It's been a shipper's market for sure. Recently, through COVID, it was more of a carrier's market. There was, there was limited capacity. There was a lot of freight. We flipped that on its head now. So people are battling on rates. They're battling on lanes. They're battling on customers. Everybody's going after the same type of business. So they would forget about these things. But the thing that I always reference in terms of business, generally speaking, when it comes to my business and I'm selling freight and I'm brokering loads on a flat deck or a dry van, I'm talking about things to get really creative with the relationship that I'm building or the deal that I'm putting together. For example, have you thought about the safety of the truck that you are hiring or that I'm hiring for you when you're considering who to go with? Are you
Yeah.
going to use a really cheap truck? Because that to me would tell me and you that the owner or the operator or the carrier isn't taking full consideration of safety requirements, such as something like this that would create more longevity in that truck, more safety, etc. Safety requirements in general on the roads and on the highways have been in the news where, incidences are happening,
Yeah.
traffic incidences, accidents, all these different types of things. Why? Because we're not adapting to technology like this. We're not keeping our trucks maintained because we don't have the money or the capital or the revenue in order to put something like this in the truck. So what we keep needing to do in this industry is pay attention to the little things because it's very challenging and very difficult to operate a brokerage like myself or a trucking company like the carriers do. How do you do that? By taking care of the little things like this. So the big things, entire mechanics of the truck, all the loads that you haul, the staff that you have can work in a good environment that's healthy, that's safe, that's friendly, and you can continue to operate. So what you're really trying to do is be creative in the sustainability of a carrier, a trucking company, or anyone that operates some sort of fleet so that they can sustain their business over a long period of time. Is that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, when this technology delivers a cost reduction, 3 to 5% is going to pay back in about a year. And then you get to decarbonize, and claim those, carbon credits if that's, what you do. And yeah, why not? I mean,
It's
we're
nefarious
messing
if
with,
you're not interested in moving forward or developing or progressing in your business.
well, yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons why people will, delay safety things or put off other things because there's not a direct payback for them. Long term, you and I and most of us know, yeah, that's the right thing to do. And if you're maintaining your truck properly, it's going to last longer and operate better and get better mileage and blah blah blah, all those things. But if it's not immediate, and that could be a problem. There's something that we've all kind of known as the tyranny of the urgent or the power of the status quo. If you think about, oh, I don't know, you think about somebody who's really more concerned about keeping their job than they are advancing the company. And, you know, we all know people like that, and so that is one of the things that I run up against is status quo. Anytime that any company wants to try something new, you've got to have a champion there that wants to try it. And if the culture of that company is not conducive to that, then yeah, the thing that you kind of want to do is just sit there and protect your job, play the status quo and everything will be okay. So I'm always looking for the person who wants to try something different, not necessarily chained to the status quo. I mean, none of us can be out there just being dumb risky. But you mentioned some data and stuff earlier. I have well over 100 use cases with data showing how much this saves. Much of it has been in other industries. The trucking industry, I think the trucking industry needs this probably more than anybody because it's more of a commodity business. And I don't mean that to be offensive in any way, but I think a lot of shippers will look at one, I just need to get a load across the country. It's a commodity. So I'll just take the low bid. And fuel is the number one, or excuse me, the number two cost in trucking operations. And it's probably a little further down the line in mining operations. And mines aren't really so much of like a commodity business because they've got a lot of other variables to work with, whether they're, digging gold or iron or whatever out of the ground. And so it's not as immediate to the bottom line and in the competition basis like it is in trucking. If you can take 3 to 5% out of your fuel budget, then you can do something else, whether you want to get 3% more competitive on your pricing or whatever you want to do with that money.
It's interesting. As a younger man in business in my early 30s, and I would consider myself more or less still starting my career. I've been in it for a decade. I've owned this business for close to a decade in express freight brokerage with a larger organization around the world. I don't necessarily think about the long term as much, but
Mm.
reeling it back into lifestyle and talking more about faith and family and the stuff that we talk about as a supplement to what we do in business and on the show. I have a son now. I have a baby boy. And first time in my life having children makes you step back and realize, goodness, I have to think about the future for the next 10, 20 years for this child that I'm responsible for, who depends on me and my wife in order
It's
to
a yeah,
grow himself.
absolute life changer.
It's a life changer. And thank you.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that in relation to business when you're talking about the next 5 or the next 10 years, because when you're hustling and you're grinding and you're in that flow, that state of I just got to go, I got to perform, I got to grind every minute, you're not necessarily thinking about 5 years or 10 years down the road. You're thinking about,
Yeah.
I want to eat steak tonight. Therefore, I got to
Right.
hunt and I got to
Or just
kill.
eat it all.
Eat it all, right? Exactly, which is a performance-based business that we work in. So it's very fascinating thinking in that regard. I think about that in our marketing spend, in our advertising, in our hiring structures when we bring people on board. So it's just another piece of the pie that you should know about in our industry, trucking, like you said, a huge focus of what you guys pay attention to in order to get to that next level and be sustainable. Because we say this all the time. If you don't adapt something like this, or in technology, if you don't adapt AI, or if you're not into the next thing that is going to take off, just like the internet was in the 90s and the 2000s, you're going to get left behind. You're not going to continue to operate. You're not going to be able to maintain. I am very open and honest about the fact that in our industry, we operate at higher than market rates. Our margins are typically better than what the average would be in our industry. So I have to do even better of a job in order to encourage or convince people to provide value, which I've been successful with so far, for them to see that it's worthwhile to work with me and to do these types of things, which is very, very challenging and very, very difficult. The last part of the puzzle that I want to ask you about briefly and get your perspective is your walk with God in relation to the commerce and the business that you do. Because I find that to be very challenging and very difficult. In trucking, it's very interesting though, because I would say the industry is pretty in line with faith principles in general. I see a lot of trucks out there. I know a lot of drivers. I know a lot of carriers. Some of my mentors own trucking companies, and they talk about the Bible. They talk about verses. They talk about the Lord. I've become more and more comfortable with this over the last 5 years to a point where I post about it on LinkedIn.
Mm.
I think you're doing it as well. You're putting it as yourself as a Christ follower. That's who your identity is in. What is the connection with your business and your career in relation to your walk with the Lord?
Yeah. I don't see them as separate at all. As I talked about earlier, I've been walking with the Lord, or He's been carrying me for a lot of decades. And so when I think about myself, I introduced myself as a chemical engineer, but no, I'm a follower of Christ. And whether I'm a chemical engineer at the time or whether I'm sitting in a prison cell for, being persecuted for my faith or whatever, my identity there really that doesn't change. And so when somebody makes an offer, talking to somebody, doing anything, it's like it's always filtering through that I belong to Christ. I'm not my own. And that just, I don't know what the word is, colors everything, filters everything. That's is my identity. So, if you're, wanting me to do something that's outside of like ethics or whatever, no, we don't do that because I don't belong to myself. I don't really get to make that choice. The Lord has called me to be faithful in all things. Like you mentioned earlier, do we do that perfectly? No way. But that is, the whole concept of Christianity is we are broken, we will fail, but that is why Christ died for us on the cross to take our sins and put them on him and to take his righteousness and put it on me. And, when you kind of have a good grasp of that substitution and whatever else you want to call it there, boy, life is never the same. Can I just, walk away from that? No. I mean, it is my identity. And so everything I do comes from that identity. It's kind of the way we're built, right?
That's amazing. It's a beautiful story. I love how you integrate that into your life, into your business, into your family, into your faith. It's all one, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Once you in, you cannot necessarily go back. It's too difficult, too challenging. Why would you? The blessing and the gifts that we have as believers are so incredible and so beautiful and so wonderful. I go back to that the Bible where it says that what's good, what's true, and what's beautiful. It's too good in order to not, aspire to be better, through that lens for sure, which is super cool.
Yeah,
Last
absolutely.
thing, Brian, tell us a little bit about the name of the company, the brand, where we can find you, whether it's on the social media or on your
Sure.
website, so that we can
Yeah,
pump
no,
out
that's
the
great.
brand.
Yeah, the company is Zelcam, Zelkam. We have a website, of course, but I do have kind of a special offer for the audience. Go over to decarbonize5.com, and I've got some calculators over there that you can just quickly punch in, how many miles you drive, what your mileage is, in the existing truck you've got or your fleet, put in like the price of fuel, et cetera. And it's going to calculate a bunch of those things for you. And, could you do that math yourself? Of course you could, but this is real easy to go in, put some things in, and it's going to give you some numbers for possible savings, as well as how many tons of CO2 you're reducing. It can just kind of give you a start to go, should I pursue this or not? So I would suggest you do that. Decarbonize5.com. And the five is like for 5%, because that's kind of what our average is. It's what we try to center around. So go there. If you want to, go deeper than that, fine. There'll be some links there that'll, take if you want to, schedule a call with me or something and understand how this chemistry thing works. I'll be glad to explain that. I just kind of pointed my fingers here, but I can draw some cartoons and stuff with you later to help that make some sense.
Incredible, man. Brian Livingston is well on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you're on the socials and you can get in touch. He's open
LinkedIn, yeah. Find me,
conversation.
yeah. Brian P. Livingston. You just go do some search, you'll find me there. Yep.
Wonderful. We connected through, some podcast matching platforms. We're in the same
Hmm.
industry. God brought us together. I believe people connect exactly at the right time when they both need it. You and I both needed each other at this moment. We're going to build a beautiful
I
and
think so.
wonderful relationship. So thanks so much, Brian, for joining us on the show.
Steve, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for
Wish
joining the
everybody the best.
show. Perfect. And we'll see you next week for another fresh episode talking about freight, faith, and sport. Good night. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you found value in what we shared and that you'll take it with you to positively impact the world around you. If so, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and share the show because we're on a mission to grow and reach more hearts. Prayers, gratitude, and love. Until next time.